Oh, absolutely. And it just saves you so much time in the long run. Being extremely detailed with what you want to see, what you want to hear, what you expect their hand position to look like. I mean, all of this stuff, um, it takes up a lot of time, especially at the beginning. But I think the dividends you get from being so detail oriented, it just compounds as the years go by. And by the time you have your kids in eighth grade, you've been so detail specific with them for so long that you get some really great musicians from just having required and insisted upon those details from day one, and doing so in a way that is layered appropriately for the kids.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and teachers in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Darcy Vogt Williams. Hi, Darcy.
Hey, how are you?
It's a pleasure to talk to you.
You too. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
So, Darcy, can you introduce yourself for the listeners?
Sure. I'm Darcy, and I teach middle school band at Stiles Middle School in Leander, ISD. Leander is a northern suburb of Austin. We are a pretty huge school district, and I came in to the district right as it was really booming and really exploding. And we started out as a little tiny band program that had about 120 kids when we first opened, and now we're popping at the seams at about 440. So that's kind of my professional background. I also run a podcast called After Sectionals, in which it's the podcast about all things band that I do with my two other colleagues, and it's a great excuse for us to talk about all of the things that we wonder about and we think about and that we're working about or working on, that I know that lots of other band directors are having the same thoughts. And it's just always really nice to put that kind of stuff out there and get feedback from other people and extend the conversation beyond our own band hall walls.
Yeah, and I think you and I talked before I started to record that most of those people who are listening to this podcast probably are aware of your podcast. Because if you listen to one band podcast, you're likely to listen
Absolutely.
to others. And so you guys do a terrific job, as anyone who listens knows, of really getting down to the actual nitty-gritty of teaching. And that's, I think, what's the best thing about your show.
Thanks. I mean, I really, that was kind of the goal. I wanted it to be real conversations about real things that people are concerned about and that people are frustrated with or happy about, or, when we all find something that works. There's that's something about teaching that we never feel really great about. And that if we could just hear another good idea, maybe we could put that in our bag of tricks. And I wanted it to be very real and very applicable to the listener. And I wanted it to be something that hopefully you can take something away and put in your band hall immediately. It's going to benefit you for the better.
Absolutely. And you're also the author of several books, or several, I don't know what we'd call those. What do we call those? Books? Pamphlets?
I don't know what to call them either. I'll call them books. But yeah, I put out Teaching Rhythm Logically, like maybe 4 years ago at this point. And then 2 summers ago, I put out Pacing for Success, which is a beginner book about how you map out your year and what you do with kids when they don't know anything. And how you can set the expectations for how you want your band program to run in its infancy of those children's band careers. And Teaching Rhythm Logically really seems to have resonated with a lot of people, which makes me thrilled. Like if there's anything that I can leave this profession, feeling good about. It's maybe that silly Teaching Rhythm Logically book, because I keep getting feedback year after year of people telling me that it has, I don't want to be so like, what's the word I'm trying to use? Egotistical to say that it's like revolutionized their band program, but it's given them something tangible on a point of pedagogy that a lot of people stress about because it's something we don't remember how we learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so thrilled that it's been that helpful to so many people.
Yeah. I people who listen to the show know I taught music theory for 15 years at the college level, and rhythm was always the hardest thing to teach students, even at the college level, because it's often not taught well or not taught systematically when we were band students, choir students, piano students, whatever it was. And so now that I'm a band director again, and I teach 4th through 8th grade, I use your Teaching Rhythm Logically, and my 4th graders just eat it up. They love it.
Awesome. The great thing about that book is it's really geared for the kids that are hard to reach. Like your kid, like I say in the book, and all of you out there that either listen to the podcast or you use the book yourself, that I talk about how like your smart kids always get it. And so like when people pat themselves on the back that the smart kids got it, well, they probably would have gotten it anywhere. It's those middle of the road to bottom kids that I really gear that teaching method towards. And if you can get those kids, man, that builds depth in your program right there.
I find it with the 4th graders and the 5th graders I teach, especially when we're after lunch or we're in a time where we have maybe they're starting to lose their focus a little bit, we can stop whatever we're doing and we can do some rhythm sheets or rhythm lines, and it kind of gets them back focused in on the class.
Absolutely. We have 2 classes of beginners this year that are just, we'll call them spirited. They are spirited children. And, I've said before, like when you have a class like that, something that is so methodical and routine is excellent for just like grounding the kids when they sit in their chairs and getting them focused and ready to go and getting them in the band mindset, because we all know that the band mindset is very different than the mindset that they have in their other classes.
Oh, yeah.
So, reining them into our environment, and then they're ready to do instrumental stuff after we've like controlled their mind for just a touch.
And I love that I don't have to teach rhythm in the method book. I can focus on sound and sound production and all those things.
Yeah.
All right, Darcy. So can you tell everyone your background? That's something maybe we don't always hear on After Sectionals. How did you get your start in music?
Well, first of all, I love that you call this an origin story on the list of questions you sent me. I love that. I feel like a superhero. So my origin story is, I grew up in a band family. My parents met in 7th grade beginning band way back when, and they were both in high school band together. Their high school band director takes credit for their first date. And my dad was a band director. He was a middle school and high school band director all in his career. And I was lucky enough to be in his band program. My parents are a little bit of nomads. And so while we were really little, they moved around from place to place to having adventures. My dad was a band director up in Barrow, Alaska for a few years.
Wow.
So they were kind of all over the place. And when my sister and I were school aged, my dad had been teaching in a 5A program. For those of you that aren't from Texas, that's a big school district. He was teaching at a 5A band program, and my sister was a little baby at the time, and he came home after marching season. It was his first Saturday home after a long and grueling marching season, and my sister wanted nothing to do with him because she had no relationship with him. And so he decided he wanted to change directions. And so we moved to this tiny little town in central Texas called Harper. It's one of those that has 7 churches and 2 taxidermies. And that's really about it. And we moved there. It was a little 1A program. There were never more than 25 kids in band while I was growing up. And my dad was the K through 12 music teacher, a lot like how music programs are set up in a lot of the country. So I'm very aware of that kind of band program or that type of music program, along with the same lines of what I teach in, which is extremely specialized. But I was in my dad's band program, and it was both extremely frustrating to be his daughter in there and extremely wonderful in that, like, I could be working on music at home and I had a professional who could come in and give me, realistic feedback every day, as much as I wanted to. And so I went through his band program, and I don't know if actually how much of this part I've talked about before on my podcast, but I 100% burned myself out of music in high school. I was extremely competitive, which I'm sure anybody that knows anything about our podcast knows. I take competition extremely seriously. And I was very active in the all-state process and in solo and ensemble and state solo and ensemble. And I had a very, very serious flute teacher that I studied from the entire time I was growing up. He, strangely enough, had been the co-principal flute for the New York Philharmonic for 36 years and retired in Central Texas. And so I had a really interesting lesson experience growing up also, hearing about Bernstein and all of the people when Copeland came and conducted and all sorts of crazy stuff that I had no idea what he was talking about at the time. And then when I got to college, I could kick myself for not having asked him questions. But I completely burned myself out on music. And by the time I was finishing my senior year, I really wanted nothing to do with my flute ever again. And when I was exploring careers, my mom kept saying, well, Darcy, you could be a flute playing lawyer, or you could be a flute playing physical therapist, or, whatever flavor of profession I was thinking at the moment. And I always kind of pushed that off. And so I started college as an architecture major. And I had all of my plans laid out. I was going to Texas Tech. I was going to be a dual major in architecture and business administration. I was on a fast track 5-year dual bachelor's program. I had already thought about where I wanted to go for my master's. I was on the road to being an architectural success. And then I got to college, and my parents convinced me that I should really try marching band. And so I showed up for summer band at Texas Tech and got me a marching spot. And I absolutely fell in love with band again. It was wildly refreshing having gone to a school that was so small, with such a small band program. And probably a lot of you out there that are teachers in rural America know that in those kind of environments, band isn't like the coolest thing to be in. And so when you're really passionate about band and you go to one of these really tiny schools, a lot of times nobody is ever giving you the credit that you deserve for your really hard work. And they don't understand that what you're doing is really fantastic and how hard it is. There's not an appreciation a lot of times. And so I think that probably had also led to some of my burnout, that I was working really hard and I wasn't seeing any appreciation for it, whether it be from my friends at school or the administration at my school or the other teachers or whatever. So I get to Texas Tech marching band, and suddenly I'm surrounded by 400 people, most of them who were not music majors. They were just people who loved playing their instrument. And it was such a revitalization for me. And by October, I had figured out that I really wasn't interested in working for somebody like KB Homes doing crummy little cookie cutter houses. And I really wasn't interested in being somebody's underling for the first 10 years of my career. And I really liked band. And so I can remember that October calling my parents and saying, I don't think I like architecture. I don't think this is for me. And my mom saying, well, what do you think you want to do? And I said, I think maybe I want to change to music. And the phone got very quiet. And my mom said, like music ed? And I said, yes. And the phone got very quiet. And she said, you have no patience for children. And I said, well, I think this is maybe what I want to do. And I had a very long conversation with my parents about what being a band director really meant. And I remember my dad getting on the phone and telling me all of the horrible things, or rather reminding me of all of the horrible things and asking, like, is this really something that you think you want to do? And I said, well, maybe I don't know, but I know I don't want to do architecture. And I know I'm really, really loving playing my instrument again. And so that's how I became a music major.
Yeah, there's so much in there that I want to talk about, and I'm not sure we have time to do it all. So I'm going to ask you, there's a couple things that we'll go kind of what's fresh in my mind is this conversation. I can always remember like mentors as I went through my degrees telling me, make sure you really want to be in music, make sure you really want to be in music. And I like that your parents did that to you.
Yes.
Because I think it's a hard career, and I don't think young people necessarily realize how hard it is.
It's a very emotionally draining career.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like a emotional boost as well. I mean, like when it's good, it's really good, on so many levels, because you're not only seeing your own success, but you're seeing kids' success, and you're seeing kids like form this absolutely adorable loyalty to you. And obviously it's wonderful for them to be gaining an appreciation and a passion for what you're passionate about. And so it's like so multi-leveled in how awesome it is, but it's also so taxing and draining. And when it's bad, it's real bad. I mean, I have a number of times, gotten into my car at the end of the day and just felt like I don't have any more to give right now. I don't have any more to give, and I don't have really any energy to care right now. And I really need to go home, and I need to Netflix for a long time, and I need to not think about band until Monday, because I just don't have any more emotional energy for this at the moment. And but when it's good, it's real good.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. So I tell people who listen to my show know my story simply in bits and pieces over the episodes. And so I was a college music theory teacher, and I was a band director before I got my doctorate in California. And so when I left my high school teaching job to get my doctorate, I was going to go teach theory and go be a college professor. And so when I met my wife, and she's a cello professor here in St. Louis, I couldn't find full-time work here in St. Louis. And so I ended up teaching theory at like 3 different schools. And so I was teaching 17, 18 hours, credit hours of music theory, and grading all the part writing and all that stuff. And it's just what you said. I was never going to advance anywhere. And so I pretty much got burned out.
Sure.
And then I decided that I was going to go back to what I first loved, which was band. And so that's why I went back to teaching kids, and I'm happier than I could ever be because of that. Because I'm appreciated, because these 9-year-olds, they love band.
Absolutely. And I don't know, there's something extremely special, and I cannot imagine what career could offer anything as wonderful than watching a kid get it.
Yeah.
Like I guess maybe being a doctor. Maybe being a doctor would be that rewarding. I'm sure it is. But the moment where a kid gets it, or a kid realizes how much they love it, is a really amazing moment. Or the look in a kid's eye when they know they did something really, really well, and knowing that you're a part of that. I cannot imagine a career that allows for that kind of joy.
So I want to ask about your dad being your band director. How was that? Was there much conflict with that? How was that as far as your relationship with him?
I think, it was both extremely stressful in our relationship and hardcore bonding at the same time. I'm extremely lucky that I have a very close relationship with both of my parents. And it's really great even now today being able to legitimately talk band with my dad. So I can, if I'm struggling to teach something, I very frequently am on the phone with him and saying, like, I'm really having a hard time getting my trumpets to do blah, 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 blah. And he offers like legitimate solutions. So it's really kind of cool to be able to, especially at this point in my life, be able to have that kind of relationship with him. But, growing up, being in your parents' band program is super strange. Maybe more so because of how the other people react. I remember getting so much crap from other kids in the band program because they thought I was getting special treatment, or they thought it was, nepotistic, if I got a good part in the music or whatever. And I can actually remember my dad kicking me out of rehearsal one day so that he could have a little bit of a come to Jesus with the rest of the band. And I guess maybe he had been hearing some grumblings from some of the kids about how Darcy was receiving preferential treatment or whatever it might have been. And the comment that, I later found out that he made was something like, look, if you think that you want to be treated like Darcy, then you're going to get to be treated like Darcy in every single way. And I'm going to ride your butt just as hard as I ride hers. And I'm going to demand the exact same work ethic that I demand of my own daughter. And if you would like all of these things, I'm happy to treat you in the same way. Because, whereas, sure, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was definitely the best musician in that band program at the time. But sometimes that's hard to be honest with the other kids about. And part of it was because he was riding my butt to go home and practice. Like he wasn't showing up at anybody else's house, making sure that they were getting their 30 or 45 minutes in every night. But it was certainly a point of contention at my house. And so just making sure that the kids yes, Darcy has a solo in this particular song. It has nothing to do with the fact that she's my daughter, and it has everything to do with the fact that she's worked really hard and she sounds really great on it. But if you want me to treat you like I treat Darcy, I'll do so in every way. Like the time I got a spanking in 6th grade band for saying turd. I got ripped into the band office real quick and told that the band director's daughter was not going to be saying the word turd in his class.
Oh boy. I think it's awesome that your dad's your band mentor.
It really is cool. I feel super lucky that we can connect on that level.
My dad taught for 54 years, but he taught social studies. So he was my teacher mentor, but not my band mentor, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most important lesson that you learned from him that maybe you still use today?
I think that one of the things that I would easily be able to pinpoint as one of my dad's brightest moments as an educator is his intense focus on each kid and how they can contribute. And I don't know if I always do a good a job of that as he did. Because we had such a small band program, every kid was wildly important. When you only have 20 kids, all 20 kids have to contribute. But it's also not reasonable to think that everybody is going to be able to contribute at the highest level. And so, growing up in Harper, there were not lesson teachers for every instrument. And in fact, I was the only kid that was taking lessons most of the time. And so, my dad was in the band hall after school and before school and pulling kids in the office and working with them one-on-one and editing their parts to the point that it was something that they could contribute on their best level. And so that every kid could feel really good about what they were doing and that every kid felt really confident that they were a part of that band program's success. And I think that's a really inspiring goal. And like I said, I don't know if I always do as good of a job as he did. And it's, maybe kind of crummy to say out loud, but when you have so many kids, sometimes it's easy to rely on the kids that can naturally do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, for anybody that listens to our podcast, that one of our program goals for the year is relationship building with our kids. And really making sure that we are putting the individual child at our forethought and not constantly just thinking about if the music is clean and if the music is in tune and if the music is balanced and if it's exciting and it's going to win some award, but really trying to bring it back to the heart of why we do this. And it's because of the kids that we get to teach. And I would like to think that my dad did a really good job of modeling what that looks like. And I'm hoping that this year I can do a better job of that.
Well, I noticed just today, didn't you post something about that, about trying to reach individual kids?
Absolutely. I mean, just with silly little notes. And honestly, when I opened up my school email, which I never do at home. Anybody that listens to After Sectionals knows that is a no-no at my house. But I had to open it this evening to get your link for this podcast thing. And when I did, I saw that the kid that I left the note for had emailed me. And it's always interesting when a kid emails you.
Sure.
It's always interesting to see what a kid is going to write, or, why they're doing so. And this particular student was extremely thankful and said that it absolutely made their day when they came to the band hall to get their instrument at the end of the day and saw that there was this note. And then the kid went on to describe why they thought my tone wasn't so hot. Because for those of you who haven't seen the picture, like, I wrote this note to a kid, and I said that I thought that their tone was absolutely beautiful this year. And every time we go down the row and every time we're in sectionals, I'm envious. I'm jealous of how great this kid sounds. And I truly am. Like, I'm not blowing smoke at this kid. Like, this kid sounds amazing and I cannot replicate it. And so she goes in and starts detailing why she thinks my tone is not like hers, which I think is hilarious and also wonderful that she feels comfortable enough to talk to me that frankly and that specifically. So I must have done a good job of describing how to make a good tone, even if I cannot do so myself.
Well, it's interesting. You have so many kids, but yet you have a student who's comfortable enough that they feel like you're a mentor and not just sort of the I don't know what I want to say, that teacher on the stage who's unapproachable.
Sure. I really do pride myself in being a little bit of a kid magnet for real. I love that kids like being around me. And I tell you, I get an absolute kick at the beginning of the year of getting to teach all of the beginners. Like, for any of you that have used Teaching Rhythm Logically, you know that the way we structure our band program is that I do all of the direct teaching for the first at least 2 weeks. While the other two people that I work with are going through and they're checking supplies and whatnot. But I get to build relationships with these kids really, really quickly. And I get to be entertaining and I get to be funny and I get to be the energy of what they think is band. And even when I am extremely stern with them and am very short with them about what sort of behaviors I'm not interested in ever seeing again, they really just I've built that, joviality with them from the beginning, and I'm really good with names. So I'm immediately calling them by the right name. And I actually feel horrible when I can't memorize all of the kids' names by the second day of school, because names are so important. But I really try to make the kids feel like I am immediately drawn to them, which then draws them to me. And, I try really hard to continue that through their time at Stiles. And I make darn sure that our sectionals are not just workhorse hours of drilling stuff. There's a lot of really ridiculousness that goes on in there. But those kids are going to work harder for me if that ridiculousness is there, if those relationships have been built that way. It's almost like if I sacrifice some time in sectionals, or I sacrifice some time in class to be silly with them or to be, personal with them, they'll work harder at home. So that time is not wasted.
Absolutely. It's all about that relationship.
Yes.
So, Darcy, can you talk to me a little bit about your program at Stiles? Now, those who listen to After Sectionals know that you have a pretty big program, as you mentioned. You said 440 kids?
Yep.
What's the organization?
So it's pretty perfect, if I say so myself. We're extremely lucky. So there are 3 of us on staff, 3 full-time band directors. And because we are in the Austin metro area, we do have access to all sorts of musicians, whether it be a college student at the University of Texas, whether it be former band directors that are now available to teach lessons, whether it be, aspiring orchestral players that are still waiting for that next audition. We have access to a lot of musicians, and that allows us to build a pretty substantial private lesson program. With those 440 kids, we're dividing them against amongst the three of us into 4 beginner blocks. And within those beginner blocks, we have multiple instruments going at the same time. However, we are able to split homogeneously. So for example, if you came to our first period class, you would see every low brass instrument, and we are split in 3 different rooms so that the tubas are getting to do what a tuba needs to do. Because what a beginner tuba, if you have the opportunity to teach the instrument by itself, what a tuba beginner needs is very different than what a trombone beginner needs. And so, we have huge numbers. I have 31 beginner trombones. So those 31 kids with me are with me in the main band hall and in one of our smaller ensemble rooms, because we have 2 fairly substantial ensemble rooms as well. Jenna takes our beginner euphoniums out, and TJ is taking our beginner tubas out. And we do come together to do together days, and for us to learn new concepts together, and for us to play songs out of the book just so that the kids can hear each other. But they do stay split most of the time. And that's like a pretty perfect instrument combination to be in the same period. But like our very next period is clarinet and horn, which are wildly different. But so we have our beginner classes split over 4 periods with all 3 of us available. Sometimes when the classes are really big, and if we're honest, the instrument is wildly important, we will go through and later split by ability. And I know that there are a lot of band directors out there that like get a little squeamish when you talk about ability splitting kids, especially their beginner year. And I think that that's like a misguided concern, because kids that are at the bottom of your class don't feel good about themselves. And when they get to be split by ability and be playing music that's more on their level, and suddenly they're not at the bottom, suddenly maybe they're still just in the middle of the bottom split, but they're not at the bottom. Or maybe it's some kid that's kind of in the middle, but now that they're in that ability split, they're first chair, and they're first chair all the time. And so you're getting to build leadership skills, and you're getting to build, a real source of pride. And more importantly, you're getting to address the kids at the level that they need to be addressed. And you're not dragging kids faster than they need to be, and you're not slowing down kids that need to like go super speed. So that's kind of how we split our beginners. So like, for example, our clarinet class has 38 beginner clarinets. And so TJ and I are tag teaming that class together, and we will continue tag teaming it until the class tells us that they need to be split. That looks different every year. We kind of wait until we see what that class does. And when it becomes obvious to us that the kids are at a point where everyone is going to be more successful if we split them, then we'll split them. Sometimes it's in half. Sometimes it's 1/3, 2/3. Sometimes it's 20 kids with me and 10 kids with him. It's going to be whatever is going to be best for the kids. And that happens when it's best for the kids. We also have 3 performing bands. And if I'm honest, we really could benefit from having a 4th, but there is literally no time in the day to have another class. Our bands are pretty big at this point. Mine's sitting at about 65. Our second band has 80, and our third band is sitting at about 75. So they're pretty big bands. And honestly, they don't fit real well in our band hall anymore. But this is the schedule that we have to work with. And I would almost always rather have 3 enormous bands if it means we can continue to split our beginners over 4 periods. Because I think that beginner teaching is the most important moment in their band life. And if I can preserve those 4 band periods for beginners and splitting them the way we split them, I will always, always take a hit somewhere else if it means our beginners can get the kind of instruction we're able to give them right now.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So Darcy, I'm going to ask you a question that I've been wanting to ask you for a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
And that's that I love the idea that you send your 6th graders home to make flashcards.
Yes.
For their note names. I can't really send 4th graders home to make flashcards. So what would you suggest for young kids to learn note names in that way? Should I give them flashcards?
So we make the flashcards in class. It's a group project. We kill a lot of time doing it. I mean, this year with our low brass class, it took the entire period to do it. And, I guess if you're only seeing your kids twice a week, that's a pretty substantial chunk of time. But getting that kind of theory front loaded is really, really important. So if I had to manage my time in, for your situation or, whatever it might be, maybe I would pre-make blank flashcards, but I would still make the kids learn how to write the note on the staff. I would still make them write the letter on the back. I think there's something really important about handwriting things. Maybe that's because my mom was an elementary teacher.
Sure.
And she believes in the power of handwriting, but I believe in the power of handwriting. And I truly do believe it sits in their brains better. Anytime a kid has the opportunity to make something themselves, I think it sticks better. Those flashcards, that's a pretty rough project for them to do right at the beginning of the year. But I think it is one of the most important things we do all year. It sets expectations very early on of even just that there is an expectation. Like, again, for those of y'all that listen to After Sectionals, that we don't let the kids touch their instrument until they pass their flashcards.
It also gives you early assessment opportunities too.
Yeah. It happens the very second week of school. So within the first 10 days that we see the kids, we're already pulling the kids one-on-one and doing these flashcards. And, we have big praises when the kids pass it. And sometimes passing the flashcards means that we've edited the timer just a little bit. But I mean, the whole point is we want the kids to learn the stuff. And if they're learning the stuff, then I'm going to be happy with that. I mean, we have a kid this year that we secretly reset the timer for 30 seconds when it's supposed to be done in 10. But I am also very aware that kid getting it done in 30 seconds is a feat in and of itself.
Sure. And
when they passed it in 30 seconds, we were just as thrilled for that kid as everybody else that was passing it in 10 and 12. Because the goal is to learn the information. And the goal is to go ahead and front load that theory so that when we start adding new pieces of whatever it is, whether it be adding the mouthpiece or adding the entire instrument or adding articulation or adding whatever we might be adding, there's one less mystery to worry about. And so, I mean, like today I passed out head joint happiness to my flute class. And, that's a little basic exercise that all my flute classes learn. And I'm asking the kids, so what are the 3 notes that we have? So we've been singing on using open and low and high in my flute class. I say, so what 3 notes do we have here? And the kids are instead telling me what the names of the notes are on the staff. And I'm like, okay, I know that says a G, but we're just going to call it high. And they're like, why not just call it a G? And I'm like,
flute players.
I know, flute players. There you go. But yeah, I think that flashcard assignment is really, really important. And I think that it is something that I would find a way to do. Like I said, whether if it's giving blank flashcards or if you have to get, pre-make flashcards for kids, I would really prefer it be handwritten for themselves. But whatever it's going to take to go ahead and get that front-loaded learning going, I think is really important.
Sounds like the solution might be to pre-print the staff and the clef and let them draw.
Absolutely.
In. That way we don't need to fuss around with rulers and,
Absolutely. Because it does take a lot of time. And I'll be honest, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It is also, though, very interesting to walk around as they're drawing it. And you learn a lot about kids just watching what they do with a pencil and paper. And like the care that they give to drawing the staff and how concerned they are that the lines are straight. And if they go back and erase stuff, or if they don't listen to your instructions at all, and every card now says A. I don't know. I find it like a study on psychology, walking around watching them do flashcards. Super interesting.
It is. So this is a couple things. One, I love that you're results oriented. It's the goal of the teacher is results, not the teaching itself. So I love that. The other thing is, I mean, this is all the sound to sight, the Eddie Green, that sort of, I don't want to call it a Texas thing because people in other parts of the country do it, but it's the idea of teaching sound to sight and making sure that they have the notes learned separately, the rhythms learned separately before they ever get their instruments. Yes,
it should be synthesis when you put it all together, but a synthesis of skills that they independently feel confident on. because then it comes together so fast.
Right.
It really is impressive how quickly a class can learn those first couple of pages of warm-ups. I mean, and coming straight from like the Pacing for Success stuff that's in there, like how quickly my kids instantly learn how to play their head joint happiness, or how quickly they learn how to play their first position awesomeness, because these are, really technical and professional names of warm-ups that the kids do. But it's all written warm-ups using real notes, using real rhythm, requiring to be with the metronome, requiring them to play on the right pitches, requiring them to articulate correctly. But by the time I actually hand them the paper, we have been counting it for so long. We've been articulating it for so long. We know where our air is supposed to be pointed. We know about airspeed. We know about all of these things. And when they finally put it together, it looks so easy to them that they're almost shocked that I'm giving them something so easy. Mm-hmm. But when it looks easy, it gives them so much confidence. Just layering those skills makes a kid feel like a pro, even when they know very little.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to make a big deal out of the Texas thing, but there is something about the way music educators are brought up in that state. Sure. I don't know if it's not sort of the competition for band director spots, but it's something about the way. I don't know, maybe you can put it in a word, something about the teacher education that's a little bit different.
No, I think that there's something to be said about the quote Texas way. And the only reason I'll even use that phrase is because I've seen it in the band director group on Facebook, so I know people think it's a real thing. But using that phrase, the Texas way is different. We are very driven by results, sometimes in a positive way and sometimes in a negative way. But we're very much into the kids being confident as quickly as possible through extremely methodical teaching. I can't really speak to how other states handle like college level music education, because I would assume that at the college level it probably is pretty similar. But we put our kids into competitive situations very quickly in Texas. Maybe programs like Stiles are maybe even a little more heavy on it because we do the chair tests so regularly, and we do so open a feedback with our kids so consistently on a daily basis. But the kids are very aware of self-evaluation immediately, and constantly giving the kids a results goal. I don't even know if that's the right way for me to word it.
It makes sense, though. It makes sense, the idea. You're giving the kids have a very clear idea in their heads of what they need to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think that, because Texas is more likely to see their kids every single day, because I know that in all of the band directors that I've been meeting from across the country through the podcast and whatnot, I realize that is not the norm for a lot of places. There are definitely pockets of the country that prioritize music education, and they are seeing their kids every single day also. Mm-hmm. But it does seem to be a little specialized to Texas that we are so driven to see them so regularly. But because we get to see them so consistently, and with the utilization of like assignment sheets, like all of our beginners went home knowing that, number one, they owe us X number of minutes for the week. For this week, it's 100 minutes that these beginners need to practice at home. And we're very clear with the parents that this is a graded homework assignment, and that you will not be successful if you're not practicing on a daily basis. But every beginner left us today with it written in their own hand on their assignment sheet exactly what they were supposed to practice, exactly at what metronome setting. And if they're going to use their tuner when they're practicing, these are, like with our brass kids, these are the notes you should be seeing on your tuner to make sure that you're on the right partial. So that the kids are given lots of tools to help them be successful very early on. And because we are so specific with them, setting a goal for each night and then coming home and then actually expecting them to be responsible for having achieved that goal, to the best of their ability, because every kid learns at a different speed. But holding them accountable and responsible for having actually gone home and at least improved on the skill on a nightly basis. And because we see them every day, I can legitimately expect it by the next day. It allows us to pace the kids at a very different rate than people that are seeing their kids on block scheduling or twice a week, or, as Jenna has talked about on the podcast before, having grown up in New York, only having band once every 6 days. Like we do have a really wonderful situation in Texas a lot of times. And I got to put a lot of the importance put on band because of the importance of football here. I mean, because the high school bands are expected to be out there and put on a really good show every Friday night. And I know, that's not untrue anywhere else, but I think Texas has so tightly held on to the importance of football that the importance of band has come right along with it. And that's great for us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, there's no question. I mean, in one of my very earliest episodes, Jerry Junkin mentioned the importance of band in Texas and how that directors had to be aware that, with the concussion problems and that maybe band may not have that golden goose one day. And so,
sure.
I mean, we can acknowledge that, I think, pretty fairly. You know what I think it is more than anything, because there are great programs and great situations all around the country. I mean, we know about programs all around, but I think it's the number in Texas. I think it's that it's so consistent across the board.
There are a lot of good programs. And one of the cool things I find about Texas, but I'm finding this kind of as I go everywhere. I've been very lucky that I've been asked to come out and do clinics all over the place. And every time I go someplace, I very much enjoy learning about what music ed looks like at that state or in that area. I have a great time, and I've met some really awesome people and built some really cool relationships over the years getting to do this. But one of the things that I think is so neat about Texas is how open we are to stealing everybody else's ideas. And all of these good programs are good because we're all doing something that somebody else is doing. And we're pretty open about talking about what's working. At least in the middle school level. I can't say that about high school because I don't know. Maybe it's very tight-lipped in high school. I don't know if they have the same kind of relationships that middle school band directors just seem to be a different breed. And we all seem to be very hunky-dory and happy to be friends with each other. Or at least that's been my experience. But we all are very open about what we're doing in our band halls and sharing things that work and definitely sharing things that are not working, and just learning from each other and sharpening each other. When one program gets really good at something and then we share that information, all that does is benefit everybody else. It's like a really awesome shortcut in our profession. And there are a lot of really great band programs in Texas. We are very lucky to be in such close proximity to one another.
So, Darcy, I know that you're very close with Brian Balmages, and I have a question on my question list about composers. Do you have you had Brian to work with your kids?
We have.
What's that like? What does a composer bring to your room?
It's really cool. I've had a couple different composers work with my kids. When we got to go to Midwest a few years ago, that really opened up the opportunity to work with some different composers. But it's always really cool for the kids to hear kind of background information from the person about what they were thinking and what they were picturing and, what story goes on through their head when they hear the piece. And I think all of that kind of stuff gives great direction to kids. And I think imagining a story to go on with music and the idea that it's programmatic doesn't always occur to kids. And so, explaining to kids stories behind pieces is always really neat. A few years ago, actually, Jenna's band was playing Moscow 1941. And, honestly, that's a pretty heavy topic for a middle school piece, truly. But the kids decided that it was actually about moss-covered cows. And they wrote their own huge programmatic story about what Moscow 1941 was actually about, with these moss cows. And, I mean, absolutely hilarious, silly stuff. But that was right after, that was the same semester that we had Brian out to work with my top band on one of his pieces that we were playing. And the whole reason that they got the idea that there was a programmatic theme to that song anyway was because Brian had come out and talked to the kids about what was going on in his mind with the piece that we were playing. So I think that that's really neat for the kids to see that there is something more than just notes on the page, and that it wasn't just some, theory project.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really neat. But, one of the great things about Brian is, first of all, the kids love him. He's silly, but he also shifts gears extremely quickly to a professional mindset with them. And he conducts pretty well. He pulls out great stuff from the kids. He pulls out musicality from the kids that sometimes I assume my kids are too young to do. And then he manages to squeeze it out of them. It's really neat to have him out working with your kids. And if you ever have the opportunity to bring Brian out, I would highly encourage you to do so, because he'll do a great job with any age group.
All right, Darcy, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
I think I have a pretty good idea of what they are, because in Texas is a very competitive state, extremely competitive, which is awesome. It's part of why our band programs are as good as we are, because we are constantly comparing each other and hearing stuff that we envy and that we want to incorporate into our own program, and just dreaming of what we want to be as educators and musicians and conductors and whatnot. I think that it becomes unhealthy when you are willing to sacrifice a kid, sacrifice their love of music, sacrifice their dignity, sacrifice their confidence. I think when you have to do that in order to create a product, I think that you have crossed a line. I think when you are willing to cheat in any number of ways, you have crossed an unhealthy line. I think that I generally have a pretty healthy sense of competition. We have a contest in Texas called Honor Band that you can enter every other year. And there are all sorts of crazy rules that come with Honor Band because of all of the different ways that people have cheated over the years. I mean, the rule list is pretty lengthy and it's pretty substantial, and some of them are pretty silly. But they had to be created because there have been what we will call very innovative band directors over the years. I think when you sacrifice exposure of repertoire to your kids in order to create a product, I think that's a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Like if you're only playing 3 pieces for 9 months of the year, I don't think that that's exactly what music education is supposed to be about. I think when you sacrifice kids' passion for coming to your class so that you can create a product, I think that that's crossing a line. And I don't necessarily think that this is what I'm going to say next is necessarily bad. I think that for some of us, it comes very naturally and it's something that we have to work to avoid. But I think it's also unhealthy when you are so concerned about what is happening at school that you're not sleeping at night and completely stressed out and physically unhealthy. I think that you have created some sort of competition, even if it's just in your mind, that's unhealthy. It is just band.
When I used to teach music theory, I used to tell the kids who'd get so concerned around exam time or around their sight singing, I would say, you're not operating on someone. There's no one on the table. No one's going to die. No. You still have tomorrow to get better at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and making the competition too important to your kids. I try really hard not to talk to my kids about competition very often. Like I do talk to them about our contest season, about going to UIL. And it's mostly because I'm talking to them about what the judges are listening for and what standards we are trying to meet. But I do try really hard not to talk to my kids about places and numbers. And because you're almost like setting your kids up for failure sometimes, or disappointment. Or even when it comes to like the district or region band type stuff, my band is doing this big, huge reward at the end of our region season this year. And it has zero to do with if you made it or if you advanced or what place you got, and everything to do with your level of commitment to the process of practicing. Um, I'm really trying to be conscious this year in particular, but I do think I do a pretty good job of not speaking competitively with my kids about things that are actually band director goals and not children goals.
So yeah, I listened to your episode 402. You talked about that plan that you have in place to reward the kids. So if anyone wants to hear about that, you can listen to After Sectionals episode 402. All right, Darcy, how do you find a work-life balance in a career as a music teacher?
I've said this on After Sectionals before, but I think there's a lot of validity to it. I think it is extremely helpful for me. And I realize that this is not an option for everybody, but it is extremely helpful to me that my husband is not a musician. It brings a lot of clarity to what I do at home and how often I'm at home and what I'm doing with my time at home. The fact that he is not living and breathing band with me, and that our connection has to be on a different level. And I say that having my husband not be a band person is very helpful because obviously I haven't been married to him the whole time. And there have definitely been points in my career where I know that I was not living a healthy life balance. There was one point in my career, not too awfully long ago, but before I worked at Stiles, where I was up at school until almost 9 o'clock, at least once a week, just doing band stuff and letting lesson teachers come in and teach and, doing whatever. But then I was getting home at like 9:30 and I had these dogs at home that were being completely ignored. And I was going to bed and not being able to turn off my brain because I had had no decompression time. And that's not a healthy way to be. And it's not setting you up for long-term love of your career. And it's not setting you up for longevity and staying in your career. It is setting you up for being stressful and eating far too many Butterfingers, which was also part of those couple of years when I was teaching completely off balance. I think it is very easy for us to take a profession and turn it into a lifestyle. And I would say that that's unhealthy in any profession, not just band. It's really easy for us to do in band because, number one, our job can be very time consuming. I have kids that are being taught from 7:30 to 5:30 every day. That's already a pretty long day. And there are definitely band directors that are at school way before that and are staying way after that. And that's giving your brain no time to turn off, that's not healthy. And it's not healthy for you to constantly be bringing your job home. I have several band director friends that I admire very much, but they leave the band hall and they come home and they sit on their couch and they listen to recorded pass-offs. And that's not healthy because while I'm plugged into my computer listening to recorded pass-offs, what I'm not doing is talking to my husband or playing with my daughter or petting my dog or, heck, just not thinking about band. I think it's very easy for our job, and I'm sure there are other jobs, but like I said, I would say it about any job. It's not healthy when you aren't turning it off ever, even if you love it.
I agree 100%. I can't say that I'm not guilty of it as well, but we talked about the advice our fathers gave us. And the one teaching advice my dad gave me was that when your tires hit the road outside the school parking lot, you leave everything behind.
Yes. I mean, that kind of goes with what I said earlier in this podcast in that, like, I had to check my school email today because I had the email from you with the link in it, but I can't remember the last time I've opened a school email at home. That doesn't happen. It in my opinion, it shouldn't happen because that's bringing a completely different dimension of my life into a realm it doesn't belong. I'm very much into I wholeheartedly believe into separating parts of me. And there, yes, work Darcy comes home occasionally, and definitely I come home and tell John about things that happened at school, or a class that was frustrating, or a class that was wonderful. I mean, of course that stuff happens. And I mean, like, heck, my husband and my daughter came to our 8th grade band night, and we all had a great time as a family. But I also don't want my family to have to live and breathe my profession when that was my choice and not theirs. They need to be able to have Darcy the mom and Darcy the wife at home, that has nothing to do with Darcy the band director. And frankly, I need that also. Frankly, I need to be able to turn it off and think about almost anything else. I need to be able to think about the fact that I haven't mowed the yard in 10 days and that my Bermuda is going crazy despite the fact that it is so dry. Like, I need to be able to think about those things, because then when I come back to work the next day to think about band, I am refreshed and I can think about it anew because my brain had time to stop processing it.
All right, Darcy, in your estimation, what do you think are the challenges facing music education or band, and how do we meet those challenges?
I think one of the biggest challenges is accessibility to us, whether it be through email and parents feeling like they should have responses at their own beck and call, or social media, or whether it be, parents trying to friend you all the time, or parents trying to air dirty laundry about teachers on social media. I think that access to us has changed this profession dramatically. I mean, granted, this is year 16 for me, so it's not like I've been teaching forever, but I've been around long enough to see changes. And when I first started teaching, it was not an expectation that I respond to you in 30 minutes. And now it's not uncommon for parents of any teacher to expect on-demand access to you. We live in a world in which everything happens on demand, and that's not how our time works. And we definitely try to articulate that to parents at the beginning of the year, just so they understand like our time constraints and whatnot, and our expectations of how our time and our communication are going to work. But I think that accessibility has changed it a lot. I mean, even with grades, like expecting grade changes to happen immediately, or the fact that a parent can constantly see in your grade book, which saying that out loud seems silly, like a parent should be able to see what grades their kids have. But we all know that, sometimes it takes us longer to input grades, or sometimes, heaven forbid, we put a grade in wrong. And I think that has changed dramatically. When I first started teaching, there wasn't online grade books for parents to be, constantly down your case about. And I do think that even parental expectations have changed dramatically, even in the last 15 years, and what a parent's expectation is of how their child is going to be treated in class, and their expectations of you as their teacher. I just think we live in a very different world with parents. That we have to learn how to navigate appropriately. One of TJ, our third director at Stiles, is a first-year teacher, and we're having to guide him on being, PC with the parents. It's just interesting mentoring that has nothing to do with band. Really.
No. It's a crucial relationship, and it's a hard one because parents, their kids are the most important thing in their world.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, as cliche as this sounds, after our daughter Caroline was born, I can remember coming back to work and looking at kids and thinking, that is somebody's baby.
Yep.
And somebody thinks about that kid the way I think about Caroline.
Yep.
And that was, as cliche as it may sound, that was mind-blowing to me.
All right, Darcy, if I could give you a time machine that would take you back to your high school graduation, what advice would you give 18-year-old Darcy?
I would say, don't cut your hair that short ever again. That was bad. It took years to grow out again. Curly hair takes forever. Well, I definitely know what I would tell young teacher Darcy. Young teacher Darcy, I would tell that reaction is overkill. Because I feel like as a young teacher, everything was hyperbole. Everything was too important, or too big of a deal, or something for me to freak out over, or something to be more angry over than it truly deserved. So I think I would talk to myself about how I view situations and how important things actually are in the grand scheme of things. I mean, heck, I can remember getting really, really angry at a set of two of my favorite kids because they didn't wear their band shirt on pep rally day. This was probably my first year teaching. And that reaction left a lasting impression on our relationship the rest of their time in band. That's totally not worth it. But in the moment, I thought I was, preserving some sort of expectation we had set, when really wearing their band shirt on pep rally day matters absolutely zero. But, being able to tell younger Darcy that what is actually important and what is going to matter long-term and what has no bearing on the future whatsoever, I think that would be a big thing for me.
I think the experience does tell you that. It tells you, you know what hill is worth fighting for and dying
Sure.
on. I mean, because some of them aren't, clearly.
Most of them aren't, because it's just band.
You're right.
It's ultimately just band.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, Darcy, if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you would conduct? Well,
I have two answers, and one is very general. But it would be anything Granger.
Mm-hmm.
I know it doesn't have to be my favorite piece, but I just think that is like the epitome of band, in my opinion. Like, it is just good old home slice band, like traditional band with good woodwind parts. Yeah. Give us something other than just runs while you play power chords. It's just good music that I think you would be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't genuinely appreciate a good Granger, especially if it's performed well. And then my other choice would be very similar to your story of why you would pick yours. When I was in college, Dr. Gary Garner, who was the band director and the face of the music ed department at West Texas A&M or West Texas State, depending on how old you are, for decades and decades and decades. I mean, he was the face of that college, and has been a huge part of so many people's music education across Texas for decades. And he was my dad's region band clinician in 1968. But he retired while I was in college, and everyone adored him. And at his very final concert with the West Texas A&M Symphonic Band, he chose to end his career with Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral. And that was the singular most emotional performance I've ever been a part of, partly because you didn't want to screw up his last piece. And so there was a lot of stress about making sure that you performed it really well. But just the entire time he was conducting, there was like this twinkle of both joy and sadness and, thoughts of the future and thoughts of the past that you could see in his eyes. And just, it was such a magical performance. And I was playing piccolo. And if we're honest, the piccolo part to Elsa's Procession is pretty terrible. But it was such a moving experience to be a part of somebody's last hurrah. And that has put that piece on a pedestal for me because of the emotion that I can tangibly remember feeling while we were playing. And I realized that because I teach middle school band, I will probably never have the band that is prepared to play Elsa's. But I have strong emotions to that piece for similar reasons that you have to Imperial.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the reason why we continue in music is from these peak experiences, moments that really stick in our memories.
Yeah.
The highs. I don't know. I don't know if you know anything about golf. Do you play golf at all?
I play really bad golf.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's a ton of fun. I'm going to be a golf pro when I retire.
That sport, that's exactly the same thing. You can hack your way around a golf course and be terrible. And then you get that one moment of magic and it's like, oh yeah, I remember why I love this. Yeah. To me, golf and music are so similar in that way.
That's probably why all these band directors are golfers.
Yeah, might be. All right, Darcy, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Oh goodness. I don't know. I will say that I've been given the most amazing opportunity that I guess really promoting isn't a real thing, but sharing it is. I was invited to be an artistic director and band director for this really cool thing over in Ireland later this semester that's called Music Generation, and it is a performance opportunity that the Irish government actually subsidizes so that young musicians over in Ireland that do not have exposure to band programs can come together and have a band camp experience. And honestly, it was through After Sectionals that I was even introduced to these people. But I was given this invitation to come and help build this basically band camp for Irish kids across the southeastern part of Ireland. It's going to be hosted down in Waterford for any of you that have any ideas of Irish geography. And I don't fully know what to expect, and I don't know if they know what to expect either, but we're going to learn and grow together. And I just think that this is such a neat opportunity. I mean, like I said earlier, that one of my favorite things about going around and doing clinics and whatnot is getting to see what music education means for that part of the country, and getting to do the same thing on an international level, and bringing a little piece of the Texas way over to Ireland. I'm absolutely thrilled at the opportunity. I feel extremely lucky that I was given this opportunity. And so hopefully I'll do a good job of bringing the American music system over to Ireland, to those kids.
That's so cool. That is so cool.
It really is. As I've been doing these conference calls with these Irish people, like I am so thrilled. First of all, Ireland is my number one favorite country. It's the only country I've been to multiple times. And it's just a beautiful country. And everyone I have met and interacted with is just spot on wonderful and so personable. And I cannot wait to take this trip on a professional level. So this is really neat.
Did Keith Kelly set this up?
Yes, he did.
Keith's a good guy.
He is a great guy. He's
doing things for music in Ireland.
Yeah, and it's bizarre. Like when I was talking to Keith and the director or the coordinator of this Waterford camp, and they're telling me about it. First of all, I think it's a very valiant effort to bring what our kids don't know that they should appreciate.
Yeah.
Like these kids, they have access to music maybe once a week. And there's not really a true music ed degree over there. So these people are performance majors that are now coming out and, kind of blindly teaching themselves how to teach music. And I'm going to get the opportunity to work with some of the teachers and the educators, not just the kids. And so that's going to be really neat. But it's sponsored financially by Bono.
Really?
Like from U2, for real. He has been the forerunner of pushing this through the Irish government and finding funding for this and providing a huge portion of it through his own money. And man, talk about putting your money where your mouth is. I mean, like, I think that is, my opinion of Bono is way higher than it ever was. And I've already thought he was pretty cool before. But the fact that he's willing to do that for music education, I think is fantastic.
You have to tell this story when you get back, how it goes. I think people want to hear this.
I will happily talk about it on multiple levels, I'm sure. And I'm kind of hoping that I can figure out how to record a podcast while I'm over there.
All right, Darcy, we've been going a long time. So how can people get in touch with you?
Lots of ways. Probably the easiest way for anybody to get in touch with me is Facebook, because I'm going to be real honest. If you email me, it will eventually get responded to, but I'm not so hot with email because I'm in the band hall or, out on my back porch. So Facebook is probably the easiest way. You can always find me on our After Sectionals page. I would encourage people to join our pedagogy group that is attached to the After Sectionals Facebook page, because that's where a lot of the meat and potatoes and the videos and the pedagogy specific content is housed these days, so that we have a little more control of our audience. But also, if you're a band person, I'm probably going to friend you on Facebook, or if you friend request me, I'm probably going to let you into my life, because I think band people are great people. And I wildly enjoy getting to know and chatting with all of you. So Facebook's probably the easiest way. But of course, if you feel so daring and want to email me, you can feel free to email me at my school email, and I'll happily get back in touch with you there. But I kind of live my band director life on Facebook. So definitely find me there. And of course, our After Sectionals podcast, which you can find on iTunes or anywhere.
Darcy, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. And thank you for the invitation.